Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Now, as you can probably tell, this isn't going to be a baking tutorial, but I am going to show you the best way to photograph a cake. I get a lot of compliments on the photographs of my cakes, especially on Instagram, so firstly, thank you, but secondly, they're really not hard to achieve. You just need to know the key factors. Number one, natural lighting is an absolute must. I remember in the winter months when it started to get dark really early and I was finishing a cake and it was 4 o'clock and the client was collecting at 7 p.m. It was too late. I couldn't get a good photo. So I actually now plan my cakes in order to get a photo in the natural light. Number two is to actually have a nice clean surface and background. Now for this tutorial, I'm actually going to move behind me into that area of the kitchen just to show you how I would set up a photograph. But I think this really makes a difference because you don't want a busy photograph when the focus is on the cake. Number three, a good quality camera. Now when I say camera, it doesn't have to be an actual camera, it can be your phone. If you do have a good quality phone, then the cameras on there are pretty good, so that's absolutely fine to use. Now the last thing you need is a reflector. Now I have it listed in my Amazon shop, the link is below. They're not expensive, but it does make a difference because it reflects light. And what it looks like is something like this. Now it comes compact, so you don't need to find space for this large circle in your house, but it does reflect light and it just minimizes shadowing, especially if your windows, like mine, are on one side of the room. This side of the cake is always going to be darker, but once you put a reflector there, it reflects the light. So I'm going to take you over to this side of the kitchen and I will be doing a voiceover for the purpose of this tutorial, mainly because I use this camera to photograph my cakes. So I'll try and explain everything I can and show you how I set up a perfectly good photograph. So the first thing to consider when taking a photograph is the surface and background. Like I said, you want it clean and tidy. So what I've actually got are 2 marble slabs. Now I have a friend who just so happens to work in a marble factory, so this was easy to come by for me. But what you can do is actually go to a tile shop and ask them for samples, or get some paper that may have been patterned with a marble and put it on the surface. So it doesn't have to be real marble at all. And then as far as the backdrop's considered, if you have a nice white wall or coloured wall, then that's fine. But I don't really like how my bricks look behind the cake, so I've actually got these large pieces of coloured card and I change them depending on the cake. Now the cake that I'm going to photograph is a nice pink one, so I thought yellow would be the right colour. So I'm just going to place the cake on the marble, and the natural light is coming from this direction, and you can tell because this side of the cake is actually darker. Now this is where the reflector comes in handy. Watch the difference when I put the reflector next to the cake. Can you see? It completely brightens up that side of the cake. I'll take it away so you can see the difference. You can always edit it in programs afterwards, but to be honest, I like making my life easier, so I'd rather just get a good photograph to begin with. When it comes to taking the photograph, like I said, you can do it with a proper camera or a phone. So I'm going to show you how to work the camera first. Now, I am not a professional photographer in the slightest, but I do know how to work a camera. So I'm going to basically give you a tutorial for dummies. I've set up the camera, as you can see, on a tripod. Now I think this is really important because you want the camera as still as possible to get a sharp image. And I can see that my battery is low, so I'm going to try and do this quickly. And I will put it so you can see the cake. I like this angle. It's a really nice angle because you can see the top of the cake and the side. If it's too low down, you only get the sides of the cake, and if it's too far up, then you don't see the sides at all. To be honest, it's completely up to you how you would like to photograph it, but that's my personal opinion. Also, you can see that there is some brick showing on the side. Now this doesn't bother me because I'm actually going to be cropping this picture to square because it's for Instagram. But again, if you want the full image, then maybe just get a wider background. So when it comes to exposure, most digital cameras have this scale and you want it to be set on 0 because that's the optimum exposure, and I'm on a manual setting too. So what I tend to do is focus the cake, and then on my camera there's a little dial up here, and I can set the exposure higher or lower if I want to. So I'm going to set it to 1/10, and that is the speed of the shutter. Now I want it slightly overexposed because I find when I take a photo, it's usually a lot darker than it should be. So I'm just gonna overexpose it very slightly. What I'm also gonna do is set it to a self timer of 2 seconds. Now someone taught me this and I just thought it was really helpful. Rather than pressing the camera and taking the photo straight away, because you might jog the camera, it's better to leave it on the tripod and have a 2-second wait to get the camera absolutely still. And I'll show you what I mean now. If I focus it and press it, it takes the photo 2 seconds after I'm holding it, so I don't get any camera jolt. On the plus side, I can also hold the reflector and not have to worry about taking a photo at the same time, like this. So you can see the difference when I place the reflector on, then take a photo with a 2-second wait, and it does it automatically. So I like having a couple of options when it comes to photographing the cake. So I'll take 4 or 5 in slightly different positions, and then I like to zoom in and take some photos of some details as well. So I'll readjust the camera and focus on the details. Once again, pull up the reflector and take a shot. Now the benefit of using a camera is that the quality of the image is going to be a lot higher. So if you're interested in doing prints for magazines or printing out, you need a high quality photo. But if you're just interested in taking photos for Instagram, you can do it on your phone. So taking a photo on your phone is actually a lot more simple than taking one on a camera. It's a lot more automatic, and you can kind of change the focus and change the lighting just by pressing your screen rather than fiddling around with settings. So different phone cameras have different settings. I've got an iPhone and it has this portrait mode, which I absolutely love using, but I tend to actually use this and post it on my stories rather than my page. I think it does something with the lighting, but others really prefer it, so again, it's completely up to you. Also, the best part about a phone is that you can just quickly select a video and take a really nice close-up video of details of the cake. So if you post a photo to your main feed on Instagram, and then you can post the video in your stories or as a carousel, there's loads of options and there's no right or wrong. So like I said, I then like to edit my photos on Photoshop. Now, I am not an expert in the slightest, but I do have my own ways. So feel free to use your own editing programs, or you may not even want to edit the photo, it's totally up to you. But I like to put the photo onto Photoshop and just make sure it's nice and straight and the lighting is even. So here is the photo that I just took, and what I've noticed straight away is that it's not straight, and I can tell by pressing M. I can see it's not straight, so I'm going to press Command A, which selects the whole frame, and then Command T, which is transform. Now I am just using all the shortcuts that I usually use, but you can go on to edit and transform, and that is how you get there. But Command T or Control T is how you transform it, and then just rotate it. Now, like I said, you can rotate it on an app, for example, on your phone directly, but this is just me. I like to make it nice and straight. So let's have just a check. Nope, still needs a bit of transforming, so let's go again. Like so. So I'm just going to check that it's straight. Okay, so it's pretty straight. I'm happy with that. The next thing I'm going to do is actually crop the photo square. It is for Instagram, and all my photos are square. If you want to keep it more portrait, then that's totally up to you. But if you hold down Shift and then select an area, it creates a square. And I like to do it slightly bigger than how I would want to crop it, and you will see why in a minute. Make sure that it's nice and even. Image, crop. And you can also see that all the background, like that extra background, if I just go back, all this tile and the edge of the marble has disappeared. So it is square. And now what I'm just going to make sure that it is nice and centered. So this is how I like to measure it. I create a square, make sure that it's on both sides even, which it is, which never actually happens. So now I can zoom in a bit. So when I talk about editing, I talk about the lighting, not the cake itself. I would suggest never edit your cake, because especially if you're giving it to a client, you don't want to give them a false impression of what the cake looks like, do you? So what I'm going to do here is just correct this little bit of shadow going on. And you see that my marble is actually 2 slates put together. I like to just close that. So I actually use this clever stamp tool. It's this. So you can just press S, and this is the size of the brush. I'm not being very clear, to be honest. I've taught myself a lot on Photoshop. There are loads of other YouTube tutorials, and if you need to do one thing, then just type that in on YouTube and you should be able to find it. So I'm just going to zoom in and go down to where the marble has this crack in it, and I'm going to clone the bit just next to it, bring it over. It's basically copying what's next to it. Can you see? So that doesn't actually look that nice, so I'm going to do that again. So you can either press Ctrl-Z or go up to the history here and just go back. I might make the brush even smaller and harder as well. And then I'm going to go in little sections instead of one big one. And that might make it look a bit more natural. Just going to get rid of this bit here. So again, if you're a professional on Photoshop, you're probably looking at this thinking, what is she doing? But I've hidden that line and that's all I care about. So if I just go back, can you see? There's the line and it's gone. So when I say I edit my photos, that's kind of as far as I go. Now I can see that this is going to be too dark for my page. What do I mean by that? It means that all my photos are quite bright, and if I then suddenly put a dark photo on, it really shows the difference. So I like to press levels, which is Command L, or up here you can go to adjustments and then go to levels. And this kind of graphy thing increases or decreases the brightness and exposure. And then these two things on the side do shadows and highlights. So if I want to make it really bright, you do that, but obviously I'm not going to do that. So I like to just increase the brightness all around and then increase the shadow just to give it a little bit of depth. And once I've done that, press OK. And you can see it's a lot brighter than it was before. Now I just want to get rid of these shadows over here, so I'm going to use the dodge tool, which is this. Oh, there's a little pretty picture and it's showing you exactly what it does. That's a new feature. Okay, so I'm going to press that, and then you can adjust the size of the brush. So tiny is like a little dot, which I don't want. I actually want it fairly big. So yeah, I want a whole area covered. So you can see it's like an overall lightening of that area, whereas I don't actually like that last one, so I'm just going to undo that. So if I make it small and start doing it, then it's kind of looks like a brush, which I don't want. So I like to keep this quite large, let's say 2000. And obviously the natural lighting was coming over here, so this will be dark even though I was using my reflector. I'm just going to make sure that this side of the photo is nice and light. And I actually like zooming right out, and it's easier to see than being further in. So I think that looks pretty good. Now this is another part where I edit my photos, is just the background. So it's very easy for this paper to appear like it has different shades in. So I like to go over just with a smooth finish of color. So if you select color range, this is one of my favorite tools on Photoshop. I'm holding down Shift and selecting all of this kind of yellow. So actually, if I turn this right down and I just select one, you can see how little it's actually selecting because there are so many shades of yellow in here. But if you turn up this fuzziness, it selects more, but obviously that is too much. I just want to select the background. So I kind of go, let's say to about 50, and then press Shift until all of that yellow is selected. Press OK. But I don't want these areas selected as well, so I'm going to Alt, and then that's basically deselected that area. And you can do it up here as well. So it's just selected this yellow. I'm going to create a new layer, and then I'm going to press Edit and Fill. And I'm basically going to fill this area, and you can do any color really. You can do pink, and look, I'm just going to show you what it does. Look, it colours it pink, but because it wasn't pink in the first place, this all has this tinge of yellow, so I like to keep it the same colour as it was. So I'm just going to go back and fill it in yellow. So Edit, Fill, choose a colour, and then I'm going to use the, I think this is called an eyedrop tool, and select the shade of yellow. Now over here it looks quite dull, so I'm just going to select this one, which is just that little bit brighter, but it's a bit too bright, so I'm going to turn the opacity down to about 38. So you can see what it's like without it and with it. It just cleans up that background very slightly. I'm going to give it a blur as well. So Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, I think that's how you say it. You can see it's giving it like a blurred outline rather than a very sharp one. So I like to just blur the background a bit. And then it doesn't look too different, but I'm just going to hide that layer. You see the difference? So again, I haven't touched the actual cake. I've just cleaned up the background. And then right click over here and merge visible. So now it's one layer. The last thing I'm going to do, and this is me being very picky, is this area here and this area here does look a bit yellow and I want that a bit more grey. So I'm going to select that colour range. I like how I said I don't edit my photos and then I end up editing quite a lot, but you know what I mean. I mean, I don't change the shape of my cakes. So just deselect that because I don't want that. And I'm just going to press Command U, which brings up this, and reduce the saturation. And that will just get rid of the color of yellow in that area and make it a bit more gray, like that. So just to go back to merge visible, and you can see that it goes from yellow to grey. So I'm happy with the way that looks. I think it looks really nice. You can see that it looks pretty clean. The background's nice and clean. Got rid of that little bit of shadow, even though there is some there, but that's okay. And now I'm going to save it. JPEG options. Again, I don't really know how to export images properly, but what I have learned is that so you can do a large file or a small file. Now you don't want a small file because you obviously want the image high quality, but if it's a large file, it actually loses quality when you upload it to Instagram because it's so high quality and Instagram doesn't need that high quality. So I actually do it to number 10. So it's still high, but not the maximum. Press OK. So once I've saved it, I'm going to now transfer it to my phone. And to do that, I like to airdrop it. So right click. So this is obviously, I think, a Mac and Apple feature, but it basically saves the quality. So if I go right click and share airdrop, this window should come up. So I'm going to click that and it airdrops to my phone, which means the quality is maintained. So now it's time to upload the photo to Instagram. As you can see, I've selected my photo and I really like the editing tools on Instagram. I think they're really good for photos, especially with cakes. I think they just increase the saturation in the right way, better than Photoshop. So this is when I actually do my last bits of editing. So I've selected my cake photo and press next. And now these are filters. To be honest, I don't touch them. I think they're nice, but for me, I like to just keep the cake natural as it is. But I do select the edit button on the bottom right. Now, if you click on adjust, you can then adjust. So if the cake isn't level, you can do it now, but I did it in Photoshop. Now, if I click brightness, I can increase the brightness slightly. And I think, again, this editing tool just increases it in the right way. Sometimes Photoshop can be a bit too harsh with it. Only up to about 10. Press done. I forgot to mention another important factor, make sure your brightness is on full, just so you can see what the cake really looks like. So contrast I'm happy with, structure I'm happy with. Warmth is quite a nice one. If your camera did pick up some warmth, you can then tone it down, or vice versa, but again, I'm happy with the way it was. Now saturation, this is what I like to whack up to about 16, 17, depending on the photo. And what's nice about here is that if you actually hold down the photo, you can see the difference. I'll put it up even more just so you can see. If you tap the photo, you can see what it was originally, but I'm gonna put it back down to about 17 and press done. And then another feature that I absolutely love is the sharpen tool right at the back. And it sounds a bit crazy, but I put it to about 50. And I just think it makes a real crisp, clear image, especially because Instagram photos are so small, you want it to really be brought out, especially because you want the attraction, don't you? Obviously too much is a little too harsh, so I go 50, press done. This is kind of ready to go. But the most important thing in my eyes is that it sits nicely on my page. So how do you make sure that it sits nicely on the page? You see the two buttons at the top center. One looks like a magic wand and then one has an arrow pointing down with a line. That is a save button. So I'm going to save the image as it is, and then I'm going to open this app called Preview. Now this is an amazing app. I don't know what I did without it. In fact, I do. I used to upload a photo, quickly look at my page and then delete it straight away. But this is a free app. You might get the odd advert or pay for it, I'm not too sure. But it basically shows you what your page looks like, and then you can go ahead and upload that photo. So if you press the plus button in the top corner, you can then select your photos and it will appear in the top left of the grid. And you can see if it sits well, which it does in my eyes. And then you can go ahead and upload it onto Instagram, which I'm not gonna do right now because I don't wanna upload this exact photo at this time, but I can see that it is Instagram ready. And then you can always just go back, so the back button at the top left, and then save draft. and it is saved in your drafts to use as a later date. So when you're ready, you can click onto the draft and then upload it. It's already edited, and then write your caption and then upload it to Instagram. So thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. If you take the key points that I've been mentioning into consideration when taking a photograph, you're really going to notice a difference, trust me. As I mentioned, all my photography equipment is in my Amazon shop. The link is below. And if you've got any suggestions for other tutorials that you want to see, then please comment below too, because I'd love to hear from you. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you very soon.